Welcome back. You're still watching Morning Live, now conceptualized and led by Neo Muyanga. On-air visual radio plays form part of the first iteration of collations by the Center for the Less Good Idea. Following the center's key practices of allowing oneself to be led by image, sound and impulse, this series of original short-form radio plays will be mounted for the stage using live, foley and performance from the 4th of April to the 6th. Now, composer and installation artist Neo Muyanga is in studio to share more on this. Good morning, Neo. Welcome to Morning Live. Tell us a little bit about this. It's interesting because in the name itself, visual radio plays. Tell us a little bit about this.
Radio plays generally are performed without the visual on radio. People have this phrase in mind, theatre for the mind. And we grew up on them. I grew up listening to them with my mother and my grandmother. And it was a wonderful experience to know that we were all listening to the same story. But in fact, we were creating quite unique, personal perceptions, right? You imagine what the character looks like.
Yes.
You imagine the context. So this idea was really inspired by that, but I wanted to further it by encouraging people to see the performance live. But it's not a theater performance in the traditional sense. So you don't have people who are fully in costume, a set that is completely lit, and you don't have props that are designed to make it look like it's a finished scene. You've got foley sets, as you were saying. So you've got a tray for sand, a tray for rocks, a tray for water. You've got microphones, and you're performing for the ear of the listener. But also the perceiver is participating in filling in the blanks. So you've got a room, hopefully, of an audience that is watching and hearing the same story, but they are participating and completing it. That was the idea.
Yeah. What brought on this idea for you? Yes, we grew up listening to these plays on radio because they would also have a sound of a door. You would have a person knocking. For you, what brought on no, but I can actually put this into some sort of production?
Yeah, it's a conversation around what does sound dramaturgy lead us to seeing that is different from what we expect to see. So if someone is saying, I'm here walking down this path, it's very lonely and it's very dark. But in fact, you're watching somebody walking on a lit stage and they're walking on a tray full of little stones or rocks, right? You, as a listener, as an audience member, have to participate in completing that scene. So you become a co-player, you become the echo. And that, for me, was the interest, is how to appeal to that sense of people's imagination, but to give them also a visual reference for that. So it's about watching the choreography of the performers as they move. They sometimes have to move sideways so that they don't hit each other.
Yeah.
So there's a joy in that, discovering what you do to avoid the challenges of the physicality of the space as well.
Speak to us about working alongside, you know, Kolega Putuma and Drew Buckland, and how these creative juices all come together to put this on stage. Yeah,
these are all very exciting writers and people I follow and I'm a fan of. None of them have ever written a radio play before. So for me, that was one of the key interests, is to work with people who don't work in this genre, to talk about how could we extend it, how could we inhabit it, perhaps deconstruct it and further it. And what's happening, in fact, is these writers try to write a traditional radio play and then failed better at it. And the performers who come to interpret it have embellished and have made it possible to present it physically. We're learning new things about what text does when it's heard in one way, but perceived orally in another way.
And I suppose it also works perfectly for this concept that is the Center for the Less Good Idea, because it's based on an idea that does not necessarily become the main one.
Sure. I mean, the idea, we all have this idea that you can present the work that is perfectly formed in your mind to an audience. But when you put it on the floor, you start to encounter challenges, contradictions, and there are nuances that you then have to work yourself through. So the point is not to give up on the idea, And the point is it's like what the Japanese say, kintsurukoi. It's about allowing it to crack, and then you remount it, you reformulate it differently. It's more robust, it's got more rigor, it's been tested. Perhaps certain parts of it that were slightly shaky have been embellished and have been renewed, and it's more flexible, and it can go further than what you initially thought on your own. And what does that for us is collective embrace of that idea. It's about bringing multiple voices, multidisciplinarity, and often we find the idea at the kernel becomes something that is available for all to imagine anew, and that becomes a better idea. We call that the less good idea.
Yes. Let's talk about that conversation that you're going to be having on opening night.
Yes.
I believe there's a discussion. Tell us a little bit about who these people are. I don't want to spoil it. You will say who is in this conversation and what this discussion is about.
Yeah, I mean, this I'm very excited about. These are two people who I admire very much. Prof. Wole Soyinka, who's coming from Lagos, and William Kentridge, who's one of the founders of the center. And I'm going to be in conversation with both of them about the work that they do and how performance has impacted on them as people, but also how the history of performance has informed the countries we live in, or that they live in. These are both very precarious, very political, very tense countries. They have been over the last 30 years, and they certainly are going to be this particular year. So I want to draw from them their learnings about what performance gives us in moments of turmoil, but also in moments of social joy.
Yeah. And what do you think is going to make this conversation even more interesting? Because I'm sitting here also trying to figure out what would be my first question as well to them, to draw them to this conversation. What are you most curious about, apart from how performance influences the way we see the world?
I guess what I'm wondering personally, and I want to find out whether they are wondering the same thing, is do they think the work they do has facilitated shifts in the world that have brought us closer to a better world? And I want to figure out what that is. And I don't mean that in the grand scheme of things. I mean in the people they have touched and worked with, and in the spaces that they have participated in creating. Both of these figures have created multiple spaces around the world. They're lauded in multiple ways. And I want to explore with them what that means for them now, that they are where they are and they mean these particular iconic things. I also want to just find out what inspires them. When they started out, perhaps the inspirations were different. I'm curious to know whether the inspirations are still there today. What makes them want to get up in the morning and repeat again? Yeah.
It would be interesting as well to ask William Kentridge why he still wears the white shirt. Because, I mean, he's been wearing that white shirt for as long as he started.
Well, you could just as well ask that of Soyinka. They both have a uniform, but so many artists have a uniform. I guess that for me is ways of making yourself functional. I mean, you're welcome to come to the evening to ask him that yourself. I'll give you the mic.
No. He's already answered that. Part of what he says is that because when he started painting in charcoal, it doesn't stick so much onto the white material. It's easy to wash off, And it's interesting that he still does that so many years later till today. Talk to us about next week as well. Paint a picture for people who want to come through. How is this going to start? I think it's the 4th to the 6th, yes?
Yes. We have a series of radio plays that are going to be premiered this week. We start on the 4th with a conversation about orality, history, radio, and then we move swiftly on to a performance by a youth group from the Windy Brow Theatre Centre, young teenage performers who live in Hillbrow, who are going to perform a version of Aimé Césaire's very famous epic poem, A Return to My Native Land. They've rewritten it, they've reconceptualized it from Hillbrow. Okay. So they're speaking locally, but they want to speak also to the globe. On the following night, on the 5th, we have a series of 3 newly written radio plays, one of which is by Gondiso James, which talks about the legacy of the illegal mining sphere that we hear about on the news and other plays. Andrew Buckland's play, which you mentioned, is also going to be featured. Then on Saturday, the 6th, we have the next 3 in the series. And the idea there is an audience member can choose to either watch a performance or listen to a performance. We've got 2 separate environments. One is for the audio, so we've created a radio room.
Okay.
And one is for the stage. We've created a visual staged room.
All right.
And so you can choose to either listen to the piece or to watch it being choreographed and performed live.
All right. Neo Muyanga, thank you so much. Such an honor having you on the program. Thank you. Good luck for next week. Neo Muyanga talking to us about a production that's happening at the Center for the Less Good Idea on-air visual radio plays and moderating a conversation that's also happening a little later on that day.